Hello, it's been a little while since I sat down to film a video. I have a vlog that I filmed that I'm still umming and ahhing about whether it's going to go up. I'm 50-50 on that, but we can talk about that a little bit more later because I'm coming at you guys today with an October wrap-up. This is the first wrap-up that I've done all year. It only took me 10 months. October has probably been my best reading month thus far. I went on holiday and did quite a bit of reading then, and also I just managed to kind of like listen to a lot more stuff this month, and also read some like stuff. So really good reading month for me, and I thought I could do those little chats about them. So I think I've got 10 or 11 books, I can't remember, I think it's 10 books that I read this month, and we're going to start with my non-fiction reads because I have 3 non-fiction reads. So yeah, let's get on with those. We'll start with the 2 that I don't have, and those are audiobooks. I have been really getting back into Scribd recently. I love Scribd. I think it's such a good alternative to like Audible. And so this month on Scribd, I listened to 2 different books. The first one is A Bad Fat Black Woman, Notes from a Trapped Feminist by Cecily Bowen. This book was probably like my favourite non-fiction book that I read this month, and probably one of my favourite non-fiction books that I've read all year. This is basically Cecily Bowen talking about stuff that she's learnt growing up as a black woman in like I think it's Chicago, and like the projects and different areas, all those kinds of things, and it's such an interesting read. I personally don't identify as a trapped feminist, but I think the intersections between maybe like black and African feminism, which I do very much identify with, and trapped feminism are like super interesting, and I love like seeing those things, all those connections, and it's so interesting to me to read about like other different types of black women and the way in which they associate or identify with feminism, just because obviously we're not a monolith. I just found it super interesting, and I really loved listening to her talk about it because I think you just get like the perfect like emphasis on like the important stuff, or like the stories and stuff. But yeah, it's a really interesting book that talks about everything from finances to careers to jobs, sexuality, sex, all those kinds of things. And yeah, absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't read it, I would absolutely recommend it. And yeah, it's on Scribd, so go listen to it from there. And then the other book that I listened to this month was The Pain Gap by Anusha Hoyant. By Anusha Hossan. I don't know what happened there in my brain. This is a book all about the pain gap that exists in medicine in the US predominantly. The book had a very like US centered lens, and it's all about kind of like the different things that can affect your medical care, such as gender and race. I found this book really interesting. It's not something that I think I didn't know. Like, I'm very aware that the pain gap exists, but it was very interesting to kind of hear about somebody's experience, hear about the stories of women that were involved in the making of the book, and also to kind of like think about like the COVID like aspect of it, because the book did touch quite a lot on the pandemic, so I think that was really interesting. I think what I really struggled with this book sometimes is that I found it a little bit surface level, and so I would say that this book isn't necessarily an analysis book. It doesn't have maybe the same level of depth that I would be personally wanting to have necessarily, but it's very much kind of like personal anecdotal with a little bit of fact in it, which is an interesting thing. I think maybe the book is just a little bit mismarketed or misblurbed. Another thing that I found a little bit like off-putting, shall we say, about the book is like the very like unnecessary and unprovoked like pro-Biden tangents, like and it was just I don't know, it felt a bit like, I guess, like I'm pretty sure it came out like in 2020 or like in 2021, and I guess it's kind of like the optimism of the Biden era administration kind of coming through for this person who also was a staffer and the Obama administration, I'm pretty sure, and so like there's definitely that aspect of it that like it definitely leans quite like political in the sense of like political party affiliation, which I think maybe reduces its impact that it could possibly have, and so yeah, that's kind of like a thing that I felt about the book. It probably for me would have benefited from being more like not partisan, but like political thought and political leaning. Yeah, also some of the analysis, especially kind of around George Floyd and racism in the US, also felt a little bit like surface level. But those are just my thoughts and opinions. I think it's a really interesting book, and I did really enjoy listening to it and finding things out about the US. If you are looking for maybe like a UK alternative, I would really recommend I Am Not Your Baby Mother by Candice Brathwaite. So yeah, that's that. Okay, and then the last book that I have to talk about in the like non-fiction things is my Black History Book Month. October was Black History Month in the UK, and I actually didn't do very much Black reading, which was really very poor from me. I probably could have done better, but I think it's because I have been working my way through this monster of a book, and not even like size, because it is just like a normal book, but like thought-wise, and this is Against Decolonization, Taking African Agency Seriously by Olufemi Taiwo. Olufemi Taiwo is a researcher and scholar and academic. They are, what is it, Cornell? Yeah, I'm right. They're a professor of African political thought, and they're chair of the Africana Studies and Research Centre at Cornell University. This book basically, what it is Taiwo's urging for a move away from the concept and framework of decolonization. And basically, it's basically saying that decolonization doesn't necessarily have the nuances needed when discussing Africa and African agency, that it's too simplistic of a framework, and it's not a beneficial way to talk about human rights or anything, or progress, advancement, development within the continent of Africa, which is something I found really interesting. I personally have an African Studies degree, and so this is kind of like really up my street. It's a very academic book, and it's very much like a book in which it's easy to read. It's not like a complete academic text of being like really, really dense, but it's still quite dense and still just take a little bit of mental like focusing, and so if you're not particularly like concerned with decolonization as a political framework, as praxis, or as like thought, methodology, etc., then I absolutely wouldn't recommend it to you, because I don't think you'd enjoy it. But if you are interested in kind of like moving away from decolonization in terms of like academia and as a lens to talk about a whole bunch of like political thought and movement, then I would absolutely recommend this book. And it also, like, I think it was really interesting. It does borrow a lot from like early philosophers such as Gungi wa Thiong'o and like people like that. So found it really fascinating. If you're interested in Africa, African agency, decolonization, praxis, methodology, etc., would really recommend it. If you're not, fair enough. Okay, so those are all the non-fiction books that I read this month. Now let's move on to the fiction books. I have a few that I read digitally, and then I've got a few hard copies. So let's talk about maybe some of my digital ones first. And the first one I'll talk about is King of Wrath by Anna Hung. Anna Hung is the person that writes the Twisted series, like Twisted Love, Twisted Fate, etc. These are romance series, so you're not a romance girly. So sorry about that. This book is basically a enemies to lovers, like mob, mafia type situation love story. Is it anything new? Has Anna reinvented the wheel in any way? No. Was it enjoyable? Yes. It was a really easy read for me. It was super quick. I think I read it in like a couple of hours. It was just quite like a nice little like breather break from life. I think I read it on one of my nights on holiday, and I literally started it and finished it the same night. So it's very easy, very quick. And I think Anna Hung just writes really nicely. I don't really have anything else to say. Like, it's not a seminal text. It's never going to be a seminal text. I mean, it could be. No, I don't think it is, because I do think Anna has written better books than this, but I read it, I enjoyed it, I finished it. So there's that for you. The next one is The Accidental Pinup by Daniel Jackson. This is yet another romance book. This is a book that I feel really conflicted about. So it basically follows a plus size black woman as a photographer who is kind of getting passed over, or like she's kind of like in competition with this other guy who is a white man. And I think there are important or like interesting conversations in the book that happen, and specifically to do with like body representation in terms of being a black woman in an industry predominantly that maybe you are not supposed to excel in, but that you don't necessarily excel in because of just the types of industry. I think those are interesting conversations that happen in the book. I just think as a book, it just felt a little bit, like it was just a little bit flat for me. I don't think there was anything like really like amazing about the book. And I don't think the main characters had any kind of like good reason for ending up together. So I don't know. I just didn't personally vibe with it. If you liked it, that's good for you. But if you're looking for like a book with plus size representation, also black plus size representation, then this might be a book that you might enjoy. But other than that, I don't know. I didn't connect with it, shall we say. But a book that I did love, a romance book that I did love this month, is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This one was just like really fluffy, really like, oh, cute, amazing. Basically follows a girl who is guarding a movie star. She pretends to be his girlfriend while they go stay with his mum and family. It's like a fake dating, friends to lovers situation. I really enjoyed it. It was very easy to read, very enjoyable, and I would really recommend it if you like romances, especially if you like romances that are just like really sweet and lovely, and just like enjoyable characters to read. Really would recommend it. So yeah. Okay, and then the last book that I have that I read digitally, and is also the final like romance read, is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This one has been doing the rounds on Book Talk a little bit, and so I picked it up because of that like subliminal peer pressure, I guess. This is a like figure skating hockey romance, enemies to lovers type vibe. I don't know, this was another kind of like read that I'm like really lovely, really enjoyable. Like, I think my kind of thing at the moment is like I still really love reading romances. I just do them as like a wonderful like bit of self-care, and so like a lot of the times I don't really remember a lot of like detail from them, which is probably like really sad, but they're just kind of like something I do for my own kind of like personal well-being as like a form of self-care. So like I feel like maybe I don't do them justice in case you like really love romances and like really want like a dissection on them. There are a bunch of other creators that do that way better than I do, but in terms of Icebreaker, I really enjoyed it. It was just very nice, very easy breezy. Yeah, literally can't complain. But I have realised that I have forgotten a book, and it's The Sweet Spot by Trish Dola. This is a book that I think had so much potential. The first half of the book is a book that I really enjoyed. It's a single mum and her child move to this like tiny island to help this man create like a B&B like hotel resort type vibe. He's like a little bit grumpy. It's a grumpy sunshine single mum romance, which honestly has the makings of everything that I really love in a romance book. Like grumpy sunshine single mum, I truly enjoy those romances. This, however, just fell so flat for me in the last half of it. I think the build up was amazing, and then in the last maybe like 50 pages, like everything was like, it was kind of like the writer Trish Dola was like writing this really amazing book that maybe was supposed to be a bit more of like a slow burn, and then was like, no, but I actually don't want to like write a 600-page book. And so the last 50 pages basically just tried to like ram all this stuff in and everything like that, and it just felt so rushed at the end, which was such a shame because she'd spent the first half of the book really developing these characters and giving them like a really good backstories and like really kind of like fleshing them out, that in the last kind of like 50-60 pages it was just all completely ruined. So yeah, that one was a little bit of a rough one for me personally. IMO for my feels and emotions. Okay, so the last books that we have are the final books that I have physically. And so the first one is In the End, It Was All About Love by Musa Okwonga. This is a book that has been on my TBR for absolutely ages. If you know me, or like have seen kind of like my wrap-ups from last year, like the end of year stuff, you all know that one of them by Musa Okwonga was one of my favourite books of last year. That is the one about his time at Eton, and it was literally just a phenomenal read, and so I picked this one up. Obviously I was influenced by the booktube queen herself, Hannah, and so I picked this up because of her, and yeah, I really enjoyed this book. This is not my kind of wheelhouse of books. I'll be the first to admit that I am a very like plot heavy girl. Like I'm not as big on like character books as maybe other people are, and so it's very plotless. It's very just vibes. It's like almost told in like little like kind of vignettes, snippets, kind of like scattered thoughts, but like yeah, and it feels semi-biographical, but like it's not. But like, you know, Musa Okwonga also kind of like moved to Berlin, and you follow the main character of this book in Berlin as they're kind of like discovering things about them, their life, their sexuality, all these kinds of things. So it's a really interesting book, and I really enjoyed it. It's very beautifully written. you actually can't take that away from this book whatsoever. It did take me a little while to read it because, like I said, it is very plotless, and so sometimes with plotless books it does take me a little bit longer to read them, but I absolutely loved it. It's a little bit battered because I did take it on holiday, but I think, you know what, it's fine. Like, it just can go back on my bookshelf for now until I decide to give it a new home. But yeah, really enjoyed this. If you're looking for a very, like, no plot, just vibes kind of book, very well written, like, kind of very, like, poetic and like flair and has elegance, this is absolutely the book to pick up. So yeah. Okay, the next book is Send Nudes by Saba Sams. This is a collection of short stories about like I don't know, it's really interesting. So they're very much like about like kind of like sex, sexuality, but not in like an erotic sense, you know, very much so like a microscopic sense, like looking at certain things. I feel like with short stories, so there's 10 in this book, I feel like with short stories you're always going to have stories that you enjoy more and stories that you don't enjoy as much. So I really didn't like the first short story, and I was a bit like, oh my god, like, I'm actually going to enjoy this. It was Tenderloin. I really didn't enjoy that one, but I really enjoyed Snakebite, and I enjoyed The Mother and the Girls, and I also enjoyed Blue Forever. So I did really love some of these short stories. The first one is a little bit for me, but that's just, I don't know, I think it was personal preferences. But I really did enjoy this book. It was also like very quick to read, a perfect little holiday read. I don't know if I mentioned that I read this on holiday, but it was such a perfect little holiday read, and so I really enjoy this. So if you're looking for kind of like little short stories, little snippets, just like kind of pick up and put down and whatever, absolutely recommend this. Very easy breezy. So that. Okay, and then the final book that I have for this month is this one, which is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton. This is a book that was longlisted for the Women's Prize. Were you longlisted? I think you were longlisted for the Women's Prize, which is kind of like what put it on my radar. This basically follows a girl who's writing a biography, like story retelling, whatever words just failed me there, of Opal and Nev, who were this like rock act from the 70s. And I really enjoyed it. I also picked this up because I was told that it gave similar vibes to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I definitely think it does. It's kind of similar vibes of like that kind of like Hollywood, like stardom, like kind of setting. But honestly, I really enjoyed this book. It's told in like interviews, so basically like how it's set out is you're reading the like extracts from interviews that the main character has conducted, and then also like within it there's like editor's notes, and it was just like such a really interesting book as like things kind of started to weave together. It was a really interesting commentary on 70s might be 60s America, but it was a really interesting commentary on kind of like race relations post MLK in America. You had like references to some of the big riots that happened. You've got like things like the Birmingham bombing is in there, like all those kinds of things, and so it's really interesting. Opal, the main woman from Opal and Nev, is a black woman, and so it's really interesting to like talk about like what it means to be a black woman in this time, success in this time, and what it means to be so like intimately connected to a white man, because like that's your act as Opal and Nev. And so I just really enjoyed this book. Probably like one of my favorite books that I've read in terms of just like immersiveness. Like it just felt like you were in the book, which is an absolute like, not accolade, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an absolute like woo to Dawnie Walton, the author. So yeah, those are all the books. Those are all the books that I read in the month of August. Like I said, it was a really good reading month for me, probably the best reading month that I've had all year, and I'm very excited to see maybe what November could bring for me. I have got a couple books that I know I definitely want to read before the year is over, so that's kind of like what I'm trying to do, is really kind of pick up some of the books that I have had for a few months and haven't picked up and haven't read yet, and a bit to kind of like cycle things out and like close things out for the rest of the year, and so I can have like a January bookshelf declutter, because my bookshelf is now very full and I'm running out of space. So I would love to be able to kind of like pass books on to people and all that kind of stuff. And that's a bit of a tangent, but I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope that you also had a good reading month. Please tell me what's the best book you read in October. I'm always on the lookout for like reading recommendations from when I'm not on a book buying ban. But yeah, I actually can like shuffle some things around now because I have read some books, and so I kind of had like a 4 out 1 in policy at the moment, to kind of like stay on top of the reading goals. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. That's really all I've got to say. But yeah, thank you. Bye. I don't know why I said thank you like that. Was so weird. I'm going now. I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to edit this video and go play some netball because it's Monday and I have netball on Monday. And so I will see you guys on the flip side.